Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us at Coalesce. My name is Amada. I'm on the community advocacy team at DBT Labs. And I'm thrilled to be the host for today's session, Salesforcelandia, a magical land of data and revOps harmony. Today's speakers are Erika Pullman and Sean Heisler of Hex. Erika is an analytics engineer, and Sean is on the revOps team, and they are here today to tell you about how effective their partnership has been working together and staying aligned. Salesforce and other CRMs are the beating heart of sales and go-to-market operations. When CRMs are in conflict with the data warehouse as competing sources of truth or separate silos, everyone loses. Don't be a loser. Listen to Erika and Sean. So real quick, before I hand it over, just a few reminders about participating. All chat conversation is taking place in the Coalesce Salesforcelandia channel of DBT Slack. We encourage you to ask questions to other attendees, make comments, post memes, or react at any point during the channel. After the session, the speakers will hop into the channel and answer your questions. Please give a warm welcome to Erika and Sean.
All right. It's hard to be an intro like "Don't be a loser. Come to this talk." So hey, I'm Erika. I'm from Hex, and we're here today to take you on a journey with us to Salesforcelandia. It's this magical land of data and RevOps harmony that Sean and I have created together. And while today we're talking primarily about Salesforce, you can extend the concepts from this talk to any operational tool that your business team is using and that your data team needs to interface with. And I'll start by saying that there we go, helps to use the correct button. Salesforce is not your enemy, but it absolutely can feel like it, especially if someone slacks you to ask why a number in Salesforce doesn't match a number you're responsible for in some way, on a report, on a dashboard. And I don't know about y'all, but I could go the rest of my life happily without ever spending energy on investigating something like that again. And when you're on the data team, it can really feel like you're competing with these operational tools. That's where your business folks live. They have mind share, they have information, they have sources of truth that it's really hard to keep aligned with your warehouse. And we're here to tell you today that it doesn't have to be like that. There's a way to manage this complex interface between your business tools and your data stack so that you have harmony instead of conflict. Business teams have what you need, and people like yourselves and me and Sean don't go crazy trying to keep everything aligned. So we'll tell you who we are before we dive into Salesforcelandia. I'm Erika. I was the first data hire at Hex, and I put my initial focus on helping our sales and go-to-market teams understand what was happening in our business. I view my role as helping Hex understand itself and make good decisions. And I'm so excited to be here today with Sean. I know that he has changed my mind about how I think about Salesforce, and I encourage you in the rest of this talk to let Sean change your mind too.
That's a tough one to follow. But yes, hi, I'm Sean. I'm doing RevOps and first RevOps hire at Hex. Before diving into exactly what that is, quick show of hands, who's familiar with RevOps or has interfaced with that team? Great. For a few of the people who don't have their hands up, revenue operations, kind of the amalgamation of sales operations, customer success operations, and marketing operations. I will say I had an unusual path towards RevOps. I am not Salesforce certified. I didn't intern underneath somebody who was a Salesforce admin. I found it doing some consulting work with a variety of companies like PagerDuty, Insights Squared, Smart Recruiters, of just seeing how they've scaled and where that may or may not have gone wrong, and kind of learning it from the other side. I view RevOps as really bringing the strategy, the process, and the systems to help any of those three teams succeed. And then it means you can kind of have your strongest sales leader who can do the sales things and not have to worry about whether they know how to do process changes or whether they can, build good data reports. I will also say that RevOps signs up for one other important task, which is being the one that sales leader calls at 10 at night or 7 in the morning, and you answer and you figure out how to solve the problem they have. As much as that doesn't sound like fun, I will also just say it is actually maybe a source of some of the tensions that you would run into with the data team in a bit of a weird way. But before diving into exactly those problems, I'm going to start with a couple rough truths, or maybe they're not rough and they're just the way that I see it. But the first is that Salesforce is definitely not going anywhere. It is big, there are many other CRMs, but at the end of the day, everyone in the go-to-market side of the house already knows Salesforce. They already use it. And it's not bad at what it does best. It's bad at lots of other things. Don't get me wrong. I am not like a big Salesforce advocate for everything, but it's actually pretty good for what it needs to do, which is be that interface for the go-to-market teams with a data stack. I'm also sorry, but Salesforce is not going to change. I don't think it's going to magically become a perfect integration with the modern data stack. I also don't know if it needs to, because again, it's focusing on doing something that is interfacing with the teams. It's not necessarily needing to be that perfect part of the data picture, because that's where our jobs are, and we can help make it do that. So onto those problem side of the things, there's a lot of ways that the relationship between data and RevOps can go wrong. For the few of you who didn't raise your hand about knowing what RevOps is, I'm going to assume that you probably haven't had the trauma of where this goes sideways. So A, don't be smug. B, I'm jealous. But some of the places where that does go wrong, the one that I like to highlight on this is working relationships not being good. It's really easy not to trust the person on the other side of the fence. And from the RevOps perspective, it's like, I know I'm going to get a call from Andrew, who leads our sales org, at some point, who needs something absolutely urgently. And I need to know enough about the data to make sure I can still solve that request. And if Erika had treated me like an external partner of like, oh, no, I can handle that, I'll cover it, it's in my stuff, I'm not going to be able to do that core function of my job. And so by being treated like an actual partner, suddenly like we don't hate each other. And I'm also not going to say we didn't bump heads, but we found our way through it. And that's the exciting part. You had a couple on here that you wanted to highlight as well?
Yeah, data silos are absolutely poisonous for decision making, right? Because you can hide behind, oh, I don't understand these numbers, or I need to understand what this difference is. And as the data team, you'll often get called to explain differences that aren't going to change the business decision. So for decision velocity in your organization, there are really good reasons to make sure you don't develop these competing silos of truth between the modern data stack and operational tools like Salesforce.
And so realistically, we think a lot of these problems can be, avoided as long as you're willing to kind of come along with us to the wonderful Salesforcelandia. Before getting into what we're going to outline, which is 4 principles of Salesforcelandia, thought it might be helpful just to have a little bit of context on this infamous system we're talking about a lot from each of the 2 perspectives. And so from my side, context on Salesforce for data teams, first thing I'll say is you can just view it as a really simplistic database with a no-code UI. It has a lot of constraints, and actually that's probably good because then it'll kind of keep you in some lanes. But if you stay on the happy path, it works decently well. One big learning that we had that can help unlock, it only ever understands one-to-many relationships, so don't try to convince it to do other things. And as I'm talking about things, I'll use objects. Translating into data talk, that's more like a table. Records are rows. But it already comes with a default set of some of these objects, and you can add on more as you need, and that's where RevOps does a lot. It's got some automation and reporting. Realistically, the default stuff isn't fantastic, but that's a great place for you all to add value, because suddenly there's a reason for us to care about going outside of this tool and doing things in the better place. But last and most importantly, just remember this tool is your captive audience. There is already a fleet of sales managers yelling at every single rep to go in and update their Salesforce. Which means they're going to be going in and interacting and seeing and touching that data. And so if you view it as that, I think there's a lot that it can unlock for you.
All right, so from the other side, how should data teams think about Salesforce? First, do not try to recreate Salesforce in your data stack. You will not win. You will waste a lot of time. It will not work. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yes. And your sales reps are not going to be happy with this solution. Nobody wants to flip between 2 screens when they're trying to make a decision. So let Salesforce do well those operational things that it does well. Instead, the value that you can add as a data person is bringing information into Salesforce where people are already living, already doing their jobs, and you can actually link back out of Salesforce into things in your data stack that add value for those account reps when they need to go deeper than this like simplistic one-to-many kind of relationship that Sean was talking about. You can also use the database-like nature of Salesforce to your advantage. So for example, Sean and I maintain the sales goals in Salesforce instead of something like a DBT seed. And the reason is that Sean's going to need them there anyway, right? And so we can both leverage that same shared master data asset to make sure that there's always alignment between what our sales team is seeing in Salesforce and what we're seeing in the data warehouse, which is our official source of truth. The other great thing that Salesforce does is it interfaces with a lot of other go-to-market tools, which means it maintains some entity mapping relationships for different tools that you might want. like the identifier for a customer in Salesforce versus in your customer support tool. And because Salesforce is acting as this kind of like source and destination, it's this complex interface between itself and other tools and itself and your data stack, you have to be really thoughtful about how you build these interfaces and how you design these relationships. So that brings us to our 4 principles of Salesforcelandia. The first principle that I'm going to talk about is you're a lot more alike than you think. So making these kind of design decisions is not just about technology, it's also about people and process, which means it's about trust. So when you're working with your revOps counterparts, think of them like they have the same brain as you do. They want structure, they want order. They're used to dealing with the go-to-market chaos and, oh, hey, sorry, can you just, right? They are the person that brings order to this chaos. And you have to be really thoughtful and honestly very patient about how you build this working relationship. If you're starting from ground zero, you have to focus on enabling first. Ask a lot of questions, check opinions, give your team member a win. Maybe you do something that they think is really important and you don't understand why that's necessary, but you do it for them because it matters to them. You can use phrases like, help me understand that better. What would you do in this scenario if you were me? What's your most important need right now? Kind of like the different cats on the screen. They kind of look different, but they're all cats. So even though from the outside, you might seem like you're not like your RevOps counterpart, you really share a lot of the same goals and values. And you're going to need this trust when you start to build things together. And Sean's going to talk about building with our next principle.
So this principle I kind of affectionately named, but what is it really? What I will say is after working through some of the problems and seeing where some other people ran into issues, architecture matters. I probably don't have to, really preach that to this room. But especially when you're starting to integrate between a data stack and Salesforce, there's a lot of early choices that may not seem super important, but if you pick the wrong one, you're going to get a lot of pain down the road. And so if you're in a situation where you have a lot of pain, it can be worth going back and asking, hey, did we structure this the right way off the bat? An example from our time working together, first thing we wanted to start integrating is like, hey, we've got some info in our product that we want to put into Salesforce. There's companies using our tool, it's awesome, Hex is great. Let's throw how many users, let's throw the current MRR into Salesforce so the reps can see it in a very, easy to find way. The simple answer to that is, well, we already have accounts for all of these companies, like let's just drop it there. But that means we jump past the question of what are we actually talking about and what is it really? And so in this case, what we're really looking at is information from an instance of our product. It just so happened at that point, there was only ever one company that had one instance. But that wasn't going to hold constant as we grew. We've already now gotten to the place, like, 6, 8 months later, where it's, we've got a couple different deployments of it. Maybe the recruiting team has one thing and the sales team has a different thing. And if we try to shove it all into that account record just through a simple sync, we would have caused a lot of problems because I also want to know about other pieces of information from those instances or from those hex orgs. That means that you can kind of start to break down your architecture by first using what value Salesforce already has. It's got some premix pancake mix that honestly isn't terrible. It already knows basic understanding of what a company is, it has a basic understanding of what a person is, and a couple other pieces for the go-to-market side. But you can quickly and easily make sub-objects that roll into a parent. And so for me, the amount of time it took to create another object that we called a hex org for Erika to then sync all this information into, quite quick. I can easily pull information down from a parent or roll up from children to the parent. So to get to that end answer, it was 7 clicks of buttons for me to make a field on the account that rolled up all the hex orgs. So for a salesperson, the info you wanted is still where you wanted it. But the source and the truth of what that information is looked different. We've run into lots of these as we go through, so definitely don't be afraid to spar with each other and dive into that conversation of what is this record really, to make sure you have it aligned. And if you find you have a lot of problems, again, go back and just ask yourself that question. Second point that I'm covering here of the principles, Salesforce doesn't play well with others. I'm not saying tools don't integrate with Salesforce. Tons of them do. Salesforce is pretty notorious for some rather terrible error reporting when it's interacting with another tool. And if you're trying to force it to do things that it doesn't want to do, it's going to make your life absolutely miserable. And so we've got 3 happy paths in order to think about these syncs. For us, you can use tools like Fivetran to pull data out of Salesforce. You can use tools like Census or HighTouch to push data into Salesforce. But if you're following your happy paths, that'll work well. Not saying you can't off-road, there's a lot of flexibility, but if you're off-roading and you hit bumps, you did it to yourself, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm also Canadian. The first point, or the first happy path, which is really easy and simple, is an update-only enrichment. In our case, an example of this is where we already have accounts, we already have mapped those accounts into what we understand companies to be, and we've got a lovely DBT job that goes through and figures out, hey, what's our relationship to this company? Are they a customer, past company or customer? Did they churn yesterday and not tell anyone? Like, who knows? That's really easy because it's just syncing information into a field. You don't need to create. You don't need to destroy any of the records. That's a super happy path. Very few errors are going to be hit by doing this operation as long as you set up your field okay. And once you've tested it, it's going to run pretty well. The other happy path that's really easy here is full object control. This is where me as revOps, I carve out a little corner of my system and I say, that's yours now. Congratulations. An example of where we did this was for Hex users, people who have a login to Hex, and they're not the same as contacts because you might have a login to multiple Hex instances. Made a custom object, defined that as a Hex user, and then through those tools and through Erika's data stack, then she's free to create new records, delete records if they need to be deleted, update them, and keep them up to date. And I know that whatever we're seeing in the stack is what we see in the system, which means that all of my reps are able to see that information and use the context there as well. I won't say that you can fit every use case into these two, because sometimes you need to do other stuff. And so my third happy path is maybe one that a lot of people haven't encountered before, but it's creating a landing table. I won't take credit for designing this approach. I saw it first in a Calendly integration, and I thought, this is awesome, I'm going to use it everywhere. The upserting is where most of your errors get thrown. The upserting drives everyone nuts, and so let's not do an upsert. Instead, create a custom object that only your revOps people and data people can see, and treat it like an event stream. So in this case, one of the use cases is, hey, a new Hex org signed up. I need to now pick up that Hex org and figure out, does it match any of the companies we're already talking to? If so, marry it over that way. If not, make something new for it to live in. There's a bunch of stuff I need to do in the system to do that. But rather than trying to solve all of that through an integration that is probably going to throw a lot of errors, instead what happens is Erika throws me run record that says, hey, new Hex org, here's the info from it. No one else sees this, but I can then build flows and automations that pick up that record from created, do all of these weird manipulations and translations all inside of that Salesforce ecosystem, and prep the record onto where it needs to be. Get everything up to date. If we get errors, I have full visibility into everywhere that went wrong. It's super easy to duplicate another one of those records to re-trigger the whole flow. That also means that you're sort of trusting your RevOps team to be able to do all this manipulation correctly, and maybe that's uncomfortable. But I will also say, you can trust, but you've got the power to verify this. So Erika hands me all of the ingredients I need to get the right setup of, hey, well, how do these Hex orgs map to these accounts? I can do all that in Salesforce. But then she's got a lovely test that goes through and says, hey, did the picture you made actually look like the one that I expected you to make? And if it goes wrong, I get a lovely alert. That's not her being, overbearing or anything. It's super, super helpful. That allows me to leverage tests, and tests are unfortunately something that's really challenging to do inside of Salesforce. And so then you can, help me do my job by giving me some extra information. I'll pass it back over to you for that last principle.
Our final principle of Salesforcelandia is a direct steal from my favorite strength coach, a guy named Dan John. He says, keep the goal the goal. So remember when you're building this stuff, as Sean and I have said, we butt heads a lot. It's pretty easy for us to get into conflict land and slip back into this pattern of fighting for our own functional areas and forgetting what we're trying to do at the end of the day. So you're trying to solve a problem for your business. You're trying to make the business better. And ideally, you're working on whatever problem is most important for the rest of the business. And so as the data team, you need to know what that is. You need to know what's important to them and what are the pain points that are really hitting whatever functional org you're trying to help. And at Hex, the way that our Salesforcelandia ecosystem is played out is this wonderful land where our leaders have what they need to make decisions. Our reps have information at their fingertips to go find what they need. And importantly for me, the data warehouse is still the source of truth. There's one place you can go that defines, what is a customer, who are our customers, what is our revenue. It's the warehouse. But everybody at Hex who needs this information can access it in Salesforce. And they can also access richer insights. So for example, we link from a Salesforce account out to a Customer 360 Hex app. And if you follow that link from an account in Salesforce with Hex input parameters, it'll land you right at the account you're looking at. And we hear all the time from our sales reps how valuable that is to them. Sean and I co-host a bi-weekly go-to-market metrics review, where we power a Hex app with progress for all of our different go-to-market functions with the information from the Salesforcelandia ecosystem, so we can see how we're doing and make course corrections when we need to. And your Salesforcelandia might not look exactly like ours, but if you follow the principles, you'll end up in a good place. So remember, you're more alike than you think, and then remember it again later when you forget it, remember that again. Think really hard about what is it really. Remember that Salesforce does not play well with others, but it's also not going to change for you. And stay focused on that shared goal that you're working on. As we wind up our journey, we're just going to leave you with the responsibilities that we arrived at separately. And you kind of heard these throughout the talk, and yours might look a little bit different from this list exactly. You know, the things that Sean does for me that I absolutely love is manage entity creation in Salesforce, especially in real time when the business and the sales reps tell me, oh, I need to know that right away. Do they? I don't know, but they want it, so we can do it for them. That's good for building trust, right? Sean makes sure we get accurate data from the frontline sales team in Salesforce, which means everyone can better trust our metrics. And those automations and flows he talked about, man, I am so glad those are not my responsibility.
Over from the data side, I look to Erika to expose metrics that I didn't otherwise have access to. I will say there have been many companies I've tried to fight to get product data into our CRM, and I haven't won that fight often, but at Hex, we've got that, and it's amazing, and it's something that we're both really excited to continue building on, and I couldn't have done it without an Erika. I'm also looking over to that data team to help transform data and maintain that data warehouse as a source for information, because there's a lot more that you can do there than you can do in Salesforce. Again, I don't have a ton of reverence. It's useful for what it's useful to, but like, let's use the stack for what the stack is best at. She helps with the entity creation. She absolutely helps with those entity updates. And still probably one of my favorite things is just the ability to have confidence through tests that I know run well and tell me when things might be going sideways is so helpful. And it's weird to say to this room, but it's also so foreign, because like, you don't get that often on the RevOps side as much as you want it. And then together
we make those interface design decisions, you know, sometimes like more like a family than coworkers with a little bit of drama along the way. We ensure the accuracy of those master records, design and maintain the landing table Sean was talking about, thinking really thoughtfully about those entities. And together we maintain the business trust in our metrics so that everybody can have confidence in what we're looking at. And at Hex, we consistently hear that we have better metrics maturity than other companies that are at our stage. We hear it from our leadership, from our board, and from our frontline sales team. So we hope you enjoyed your journey through Salesforcelandia with you. Sincerely, we'd really love to connect to you. We'll be around at Hex booth 313. You can come find us. Our emails are there on the screen. If you're a data person and you have a RevOps person that you want to talk to Sean, we'd love to have that joint conversation and help you find your way to your own partnership. And then finally, we're on the hook to deliver a blog series about this for Barry, so you'll be seeing that on the Hex blog in the future. And while we start queuing up questions in the Slack channel, I just want to give a shout out to the wonderful Hex team. Our in-house designer, Annie, deserves all the credit for the 90s wonder of these amazing slides, and the rest of the Hex team for supporting us in developing this talk. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Erika and Sean, for a great presentation, and thank you everyone in person and online for joining us. If you'd like to submit questions or comments to our speakers, please do so in the Coalesce Salesforcelandia channel on DBT Community Slack. The next session's titled DBT and MDS in Small Batch Academic Research will be starting right here at 4 p.m. in about 15 minutes. And in other areas at the same time, we have Streaming with DBT, the Jaffle Shop Don't Stop, Democratizing Data at Zillow with DBT, Airflow, Spark, and Kubernetes, and do analytics teams need product managers? Thank you and see you soon.